As is customary on these programs, we usually encourage our guests, Mr. Gentle, to tell us a bit about themselves. So as an introduction, please do give us a brief insight into Marlon Gentle, your entrance into the Guyana Fire Service, the roles you played, and your ultimate ascension to the pinnacle of the Guyana Fire Service.
Okay, if I could start right, I was born in Georgetown, but I actually grew up in the Demerara River, a little village called Lowood on the Demerara River, just about 15 miles south of Timeri. My primary education was in the Demerara River at the Lowood Primary School, and after then I came to the city of Georgetown on a government scholarship, where I attended the South Georgetown Secondary School until my CXCs. I then joined the Guyana National Service in 1984. I spent 9 months in the Guyana National Service, and then I came to the Guyana Fire Service in the early 1985. Actually, in March 1985, I enlisted in the Fire Service as a member of the Guyana Fire Service, the rank of a fireman. After initial training, I spent most of my years here at Central Fire Station and also at the outstations, West Rhineville, Campbellville. At that time when I joined, the Alberton Fire Station was closed at that time, so there was no fire station at Alberton. Just a little area for training. In 1991, I attended a Standard Military Officers course at the GDF, and I came back to the Guyana Fire Service in 1992 as a cadet officer. And from then, I moved through the ranks, fire promotions, until I was appointed Chief Fire Officer in 2009, January. In between that, I would have held various appointments. The head of training at one time, training officer, for about 4 years. I then worked within the fire prevention department as the head of the fire prevention and safety unit, and also being responsible for inspections and fire investigations and so on. After I was promoted up to the rank of divisional officer, I headed to Berbice, where I was commander for the Berbice district for a while. And then I returned to Georgetown and held the appointments of administrative officer, deputy chief, before I was promoted to chief fire officer.
When were you promoted to chief?
In 2009, the 1st of January. So actually, this is my 11th year, or going into my 12th year as chief fire officer.
Longest serving fire?
Historically, yes, I am. I also had a lot of exposure both overseas and training. I spent some time at Brayton College, Texas A&M, where I did some industrial fire training. I did my fire investigators course under the auspices of the Ontario Fire College. That was done in St. Lucia. And I also did some other training in the UK and Canada. What I would say, I think this career was very rewarding for me. It's something I always wanted to serve, and I think I would have been given the opportunity to serve at the various departments at the highest level in the Guyana Fire Service. So actually, I am at the pinnacle of the fire service in terms of there's no higher heights to achieve. But now it's the beauty about this is now the time that you cascade downwards in imparting your experience, your knowledge, and everything else, so to ensure that the fire service continues to flow, continues to function, and also the efficiency of the fire service goes upwards at all times.
I would like for you to give us an insight into what a typical day in the life of a fireman or woman on duty is like. Do they just sit around waiting for a call to respond to a fire? What is it like?
The fire service's role in any society is to be able to respond at the shortest possible time to any emergency. And the emergencies come both from a fire emergency or a non-fire humanitarian type emergency. To be able to do that level of response and with the level of efficiency that it's needed, there must be a lot of preparation. So yes, there's always a perception that firefighters just sit and wait on a fire, but you have to be prepared. And the preparation is always, there's a lot of routine that is always done every day to ensure that you are at that stage of preparedness. Things like your equipment checks, your equipment testing, standardizing your equipment, training, and also using previous incidents as guides and reviews so that you could better the next time. So it's, as we say, a firefighter is never off duty. You may stop, you may not be at work, but you're not off duty. Because you are called to, or it's in your blood that you always will respond to an emergency. If it's within your range, you observe it. There's always something there that could attract your attention as the emergency first responder.
In your years of serving the department, surely you would have responded to a number of fires, either as fire chief or general duty rank or what's not. What do you recall to be some of the most devastating fires that you've had to deal with?
Well, as you said, I've had a lot of interventions with fires at all the levels. I could start with, let me start with my first major fire. We were just out of training school, and I don't know if you know the Belvedere Hotel. That's on Camp Street. On Camp Street, just opposite where GRA is now. Where you see that new building is being erected, that was a large hotel there. And I always remember that fire. It was January. And that was the largest fire, for a long while we encountered. And that was the fire when the fire service was at its challenging peak. We only had about 3 trucks in the whole of Georgetown. I remember that fire because we had to have resources as far as Leonora coming into Georgetown to stop the fire. That's where we were. But as things advanced, I could tell you about some of the other major fires we had. One of the largest we had that I attended, and I was a junior officer then, was a fire in Norton Street that took out almost the entire block, Norton and Cream Street. We lost 17 buildings that night. And again, we were at a stage, that was 1988. We were at a stage where we had we were not good in equipment. We were very short on equipment. And then things started to pick up in the 90s. But I could tell you some of the challenges I had as someone in command. I would have commanded the 2 that stood out for me is the St. Joseph's Mercy Hospital fire. That Monday morning, and we turned up there, the whole front of the building, fully engulfed. And we had to, take some very affirmative action, evacuation and firefighting at the same time, so as to prevent that fire from spreading to the back where the wards were. And that is what I think that's one of the hallmarks of my career in terms of command, in terms of using the resources you had available to you. Of course, we were well resourced then, or far better resourced by then, and also the support we got from like the police and the other agencies around there, to mitigate that. And we lost no one in that fire, even though the potential was great for persons being injured or even life. And the second fire was another hospital, the Georgetown Hospital. A couple months, the psychiatric ward, the first one, and that was total. There were a few others that stood out too. The second Rice Board fire, when we had, we had some challenges too, and that was in the early 90s. And as well as that fire that started at Camp and Regent, where that was the old AH and L. Kissoon's building. The Republic Bank now stands there. And that fire went in a diagonal direction and took out, I think we lost about 7 buildings, but they were mostly, all of them were businesses. And that was during that period of the 2001 unrest. One afternoon when that fire started. And we had some serious challenges, and it's a different situation. That this was not a fire where you had your resources were okay, yes, but then you had a lot of impedance. You had people, protesters on the street cutting hoses as you were trying to put out the fires. Firemen were attacked, and so on. The good thing is that we were able to stop that fire before it jumped to visit to Wellington Street, or also to jump Regent Street onto Guile gas station. So, even the last fire they had there, this is not the first time we had threats to that gas station. We were able to save it. But yes, they were indeed, we had some tough battles in this city of Georgetown.
I can recall the fires at Monishwars.
That was 2000. I can remember that. That was 2000, and that would have been 2004, I think it was. Yes. I wasn't here then. I was Commander Borbis then. But I remember that.
Welcome back. We spoke of some of your major fires in your career, but what makes firefighting different on the coastline compared to the interior locations?
Well, I would say, the physical layout of the coastline, it's more populated, it's more dense. Most of the areas we operate in the coastline is where most of our population are. So definitely you have closer buildings, more large buildings, different types of activities going on in the buildings. So it's a multiplicity of risks in a very small space, given space. For instance, like in the interior, where you have, bigger spaces, buildings are not so close. The level of activities are not that intense as in the city or in the environs of the city or the populated centers. So, while the risk of fires are there, the threat or the damage, the risk of damage in the city or in the coast is far greater. And then also, one of the major things you have to contend with along this entire coast is the Atlantic winds.
Earlier, we spoke of the challenges on the Regent Street fire where persons severed your equipment. What systems do you have in place, Mr. Gentle, to ensure that fire hydrants are now in working order?
It's a situation that still needs a lot of work to be done to bring it back up. If I could give you a historical context too. At one stage, the city of Georgetown had in excess of 1,400 fire hydrants working. Sometime in the 80s, and I alluded to you the fact of that 14 buildings that we lost, 14 to 17 buildings that we lost. I think that was one of the greatest fires we had in the modern history of Georgetown, in terms of buildings being affected. The issue there that night was the failure of the fire hydrant system. So it's been a while that the reliability of the fire hydrant system has not been what it ought to be. And looking at in modern conventions of firefighting and the conventional need for water for firefighting. Because if you were to look at the hydrant system, most of those hydrants are vandalized right now. The flows from the hydrants cannot be guaranteed to supply all firefighting pumps. Because, I think there is also a myth that people believe when you turn up and you stretch your hose into a fire hydrant that you pull everything in there. It's not. It's the opposite to that. A hydrant is supposed to supply water with a certain amount of pressure to activate the fire pumps, so as to give you that required pressure for firefighting. If the pressure is low in the hydrants, the pump will not work, and you will damage your pumps too. We have made, many interventions. We've observed this issue of the fire hydrant system. We've tried to engage, and we continue to engage. And this is not to say that we have not been given some level of support by the GDOI, but the fact is, the entire firefighting water supply system is sitting on an aged pipeline system. And with an expanding city, the demand for water also is greater. So therefore, I say that to say that there needs to be a comprehensive, or we have to have a more comprehensive and technical approach to look at water demands of firefighting and design the right support mechanisms in terms of fire hydrants and everything else.
Have you communicated this to the powers that be? And we've been seeing some major expansion in roads and communities. What systems are in place to have those communities outfitted with fire hydrants?
As a matter of fact, we sit on a board with the town planning authorities, and we have made our contributions to what should be happening in these new developed areas, even prior to construction, even prior to houses equipment going down. When you do infrastructure work, fire hydrants and as we call it, the firefighting support infrastructure ought to be given the same level of prominence as electricity or even potable water.
The fire service has been providing support to the joint services. How challenges was it fighting prison fires, and what can you tell us about those experiences and encounters?
A prison is a different institution. A prison is a correctional institution, is a place for incarceration of persons who would have committed crimes. So therefore, that by itself is a challenge. In terms of firefighting, the biggest challenge to put out a fire in any prison environment is that you have to have a multiplicity of tasks being done at the same time. In terms of getting persons out, rescuing, guaranteeing the safety of the inmates, as well as having access to the fire scenes. Because you have a large complex behind a wall. This is not like a residential area. You just drive up and you have access to a building. You have the issue is access, and fires. Most times fires in prisons are not normal fires, as we would call it, maybe starting from a spark or some failing electricity system. It's somebody who has, it starts from someone who wants to destroy a prison by fire. And there's, the security issues involved, unrest, personal behavior, and everything else. So it's indeed a challenge, but you have to, that is why I'm glad you used the term, the support to the joint services. In a major incident involving the prisons, therefore, it is necessary to have all the different arms of the joint services employed or deployed so that different things happen at the same time.
Just joined us, we're speaking with Fire Chief Mr. Marlon Gentle, and our location of the shoot is the Central Fire Station here at Starbrook, Georgetown. Mr. Gentle, the Guyana Fire Service would have responded to what is considered one of the deadliest fires in our history, based on our individual recollection. That is the Camp Street fire. Walk us through what took place on that day after you got that call. How did you respond, the fire service that is, and talk to us a bit about that.
Okay, it was just a normal morning, and then when the call came in, fired at the Camp Street prisons, we have an established protocol of responding to institutions like the prisons, hospitals, and so on. So the response was kicked in, the units were deployed there. When they got there, they reported a mass riot and destruction of property in Swing. There was some activities going on by the prisoners that prevented us from getting in. When I arrived there, there was a very hostile situation going on. The fire had by then been put out because there was not much fires in the building, so to speak, but just one area. But the bodies, we discovered the bodies in the what you call the prison cells and also on the landings. What came out then was that there was this mass riot and destruction of property undertaken by the prisoners there. The Board of Inquiry that was set up afterwards highlighted it, and our investigation also highlighted it, where the prisoners took mattresses, barricaded themselves, and then it was set afire. I don't think none of them understand how fires behave and the destructive nature of fire. So in seconds, they were all dead people.
For the viewers, just to remind you, 18 prisoners, Mr. Gentle?
17.
17 prisoners died in that fire at that Camp Street prison. Mr. Gentle, the fire service is not just dealing with fire, with quelling fires and putting out fires and so on. You've now evolved into rescue operation. Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, from our setup, we were always involved in rescue operations, but it wasn't highlighted. when the Guyana Fire Service initially started up, it was the Fire and Ambulance Services of Guyana. So we did both fire and ambulance work, and then sometime in the 80s, the ambulance service went away from us. And then it resumed back in 2016 with a joint venture with the Ministry of Public Health. The idea is that we try to have ambulances functional at all fire stations, and that we have a dedicated unit of personnel who trained as emergency medical providers, emergency medical technicians who are trained. And they're supervised and given medical control by the Ministry of Health Emergency Department, the emergency, the specialist in emergency medicines. Apart from that, the plan is to roll this whole emergency medical service out to the entire length and breadth of Guyana. And we envisage maybe in the next 3 to 4 years to have at least 25 ambulances running all over Guyana, from Crabwood Creek right on to Mabaruma, right on to Letton. We already have some amount of personnel trained, and this is an incremental development plan yearly. We also do a lot of what we call extrication type rescues, especially now with the motor vehicle accidents. Most of the incidents we are called to is to extract persons trapped in crash vehicles. And what is called, there's a protocol, the motor vehicle accident protocol, that we do extraction from vehicles, vehicle extrications. We also have persons trained to do technical rescue, like rescues in pits and confined spaces and so on. But we've never been called to that level of rescue. That most of our rescues are involving motor vehicles or machinery.
The welfare of firefighters, do you believe, as the fire chief, and coming through the ranks to where you are today, firefighters are adequately compensated for the work they do, the service they provide?
I think if you ask any service provider in Guyana that question, you will get the same answer, which I won't tell you.
Some firefighters in the past have been accused of removing stuff from the scene of fires to which they are called. And one of the most embarrassing cases was the one at the airport with the Fly Jamaica. I think those guys, the matter was thrown out recently. How do you respond to these type of allegations and behavior by ranks?
Any misconduct, whether it be theft, whether it be unprofessional behavior by any member of the fire service, is dealt with condemned. I heard you say that the matter was thrown out. That is not totally true. Someone was convicted. Mm-hmm. One of the persons was convicted.
But there were four, I think four. Yeah.
The others were acquitted because there was no case against them, basically. Mm-hmm. The evidence was not against them, but the evidence was strong against that one person. He would have suffered. He's no longer with us. We've had incidents before too of theft from fire scenes by firefighters. Persons were dismissed and also placed before the court.
Is the force bracing for a lawsuit for those three who were acquitted? Maybe on the grounds of wrongful dismissal?
No, but they're not dismissed as yet. Okay. They were interdicted,
mm-hmm.
and we have to wait the outcome of the court's decision. They were acquitted, yes, but then there are some other administrative issues that have to be sorted out. Mm-hmm. So I'm not bothered about any lawsuit, or I don't think it's a matter of a lawsuit. You have to be held accountable for your actions.
Are there counseling sessions for firefighters who might react negatively to the site or the gruesome sites at fire scenes and accidents and so on? Do you have cases where people cannot deal with it, your officers?
Let me say this. We have a standing welfare department that is equipped with persons to deal with those situations. Every fire scene that has a level of gruesomeness or abnormal activities, the ranks are interviewed, and in some instances they're even exposed to more technical or more professional services from counselors and so on.
Christmas. Okay, before we get to Christmas, what are some of, Mr. Gentle, what are some of the most common causes of fires you would have been able to record based on your investigations and so on over the years?
Over the years, most of the most common causes are in three categories. There's the deliberate fires. That's the fires started by persons for...
Are you giving me them in the chronological order? Or
I'm just giving you.
Okay.
The highest level are the deliberate fires. That's the persons who set fires to rubbish, open plots of lands and so on. Those are always the highest every year. They account for more than 50% of the actual fires we attend to. That is followed closely by electrical fires, especially electrical fires involving outdoor electrical infrastructure. The lamp poles, the electrical wires, transformers, and so on. And then the next group or subsets are fires that are maliciously set, or what we call the arson fires. Those also have a significant number. And then the last is the fires that are started in the homes by unattended children. Those are also a significant group, but over the last 3 years, we've noted that there's a drop in a reduction, in those instances.
We have two final questions. I have two final questions for you. But before we get to that, just to remind you, we're speaking with Fire Chief, Mr. Marlon Gentle, and our area of shoot today is the Central Fire Service, Central Fire Station here in downtown Georgetown. Mr. Gentle, there is the issue of persons putting additional appliances and equipment which require the use of electricity and so on in their homes without consideration, knowledge, or care for the fact that it might be overloading their circuits. How do you address that? What can you say to our viewers? You could look straight into our yellow camera and explain to them the dangers in doing this.
Electrical outlets are designed to take a certain load in terms of the amount of appliances that have to consume that electricity. And if, for instance, those appliances are heavier than that point, the ratings of that point, we call it electrical overload, and it also would lead to overheating and short-circuiting, and fires will start in your buildings. I have seen the GPL as well as the Ministry of Public Works, the government electrical inspectors also, and Bureau of Standards, putting out some very good ads as to the safety of electrical appliances. And we would like to join also in encouraging our users, our citizens, not to overload circuits. The rule and thumb is there should not be more than at least 2 appliances to every point. And also if the appliances are used for purposes such as heat generation, like your heaters, like your microwave ovens and so on, those should not be shared by any other appliance. That should be single-use appliances. Also, appliances should be switched off and plugged out when not in use. Secondly, as you upgrade your appliances by acquiring more appliances for your building, you need to have a certified electrician check your building to see that it has the right ratings and load so that all those appliances can work within your building, or else you'll have short circuiting. The second thing is, and we have seen it too, lastly I'd like to stress on, people are in the habit of also bypassing their meter circuitry so that some of the load that these appliances are consuming is not charged to the electricity providers. And that is what we have seen a lot causing fires in buildings. The bypassing or the wanton bypassing of electrical meter circuits and so on.
Mr. Gentle, we're in the Christmas season. What message do you wish to send to persons during this period? I see you also work with a document which suggests you might have stats that you'd like to share with us also. Speak on the Christmas season, and if there's anything from your document you'd like to share with us.
On the aspect of Christmas, yes, of course, I would like every Guyanese to have a very enjoyable festive season, but at the same time, you must do it with vigilance and with safety in mind, especially fire safety. We just spoke about overloading electrical circuit. We also have to speak about how you decorate and what you use for decorations, bearing in mind that they should not be near heat generating appliances or near anything that will cause it to easily catch a fire. Using your fairy lights safely, using your drop cards and so on. Don't pass them under carpets or under ornate blinds. And also, whatever you do when you decorate, do not impede on your means of escape from your buildings, because that's also is an area of concern. We know for a fact that most people do a lot of security features on their buildings in terms of grills and additional burglar-proof type construction and installations. Please do so safely, and remember, do not impede your means of escape or the way how you have to exit your buildings. And also, teach your children or teach persons in that environment, that building you're living in, all of the means of which you could get out of there. And get out of there quickly and safely. Again, we need you to enjoy your Christmas holidays. It's a culture that is unique to Guyana. People look forward for the Christmas season, but do so safely. Do not take any chances with the electricity or how you cook, how you imbibe also. The smokers, dispose of your cigarettes. If you're using these nice fairy lights, ensure that they work to the manufacturer specifications, read the labels, and install them according to what the labels say they should be installed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gentle, for joining us. Viewers, this was Focus with Big Smith. My name is Leroy Smith, and we were speaking with Fire Chief Mr. Marlon Gentle. Our area of shoot today was the Central Fire Service, Central Fire Station here in Starbrook, Georgetown. I want to say thank you very much to our technical team. Do join us here again next week.